welcome back to my channel, and this is my monthly wrap-up. This month was a big month for rereads. I tried to take part in the readathon. It didn't work very well. I hopefully will have the little bit that I did record for that up soon, but it was not a very eventful type of video to shoot because I was so crazy busy. I haven't done my wrap up, so I figured that this can be kind of a Booktube-athon / what I read in July wrap up. So in July, I read 9 books. I read 2 of those books during the Booktube-athon. One I finished the day after the Booktube-athon, everything else I read before. The first couple weeks of July were really eventful as far as reading goes. I was on planes and in hotels recovering from jet lag. It was just me and Elise. She was watching anime and I was reading books. So I'm going to start with the bottom and work my way up, I guess, and show you what I read as I went along. I listened to some of these on audiobook and I read the rest of everything else on my Kindle. I actually have the physical copies here at home, but I did not read them on my physical copies because all I had with me was Gemina, which I didn't read, and I also had my Kindle, so everything was off of my Kindle or off audiobooks, one of the two. Okay, so I listened to this on audiobook and I still cannot remember how to say her name. This is Sybil's Secret, and this is the second book to the Wildwood Dancing duology. It's a companion novel. You don't have to read one in order to read the other, but they do reference one in the other. So I would suggest that if you wanted to read this, read Wildwood Dancing first and then read this one. Wildwood Dancing was kind of dry and very long and drawn out. It was difficult to read. I was really hesitant about this book, but I ended up listening to it on the flight from Guam to Travis Air Force Base, and it was a lot better. I don't know if it was better because I listened to it or if it was better because it was just a better book, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I listened to it. Now that I'm done with it, I have to decide if I want to keep the series or not, because I don't think I'm going to reread this. I gave it like 3 stars. I really did enjoy it. It just, I don't think I'm going to end up listening to or reading any more of this one. So the next set of books that I read are all rereads for me. Everything else that I read, except for the book that I finished at the very end of the month, are all rereads for me. And I don't know why. I was just being nostalgic and I decided to reread some books. And it's a little embarrassing, but I reread the entire Twilight series. I blew through these 4 books and read them literally one right after the other. I don't know how I managed to read them so fast, but I did. I think partially because I'd already read them before. But I love them still. I totally, completely love them still. They are a very much guilty pleasure for me. So after I finished reading all of these, I read the life and death gender swap version of Twilight because I wanted to add it on there. However, I read that for the Booktube-athon, so give me just 1 second and I will get back to that. But in the meantime, this is what I read. And I read them super fast, and I read them all while we were in San Francisco, because we would go out for a couple days, have a day off, go out for a couple days, have a day off. And during our days off and at night after Elise would go to sleep, I was reading. And I was reading fast. The next book that I read was City of Ashes. After I finished Sybil's Secret, this was the next book that I picked up on my audiobooks because I really wanted to reread the series so I could finish it. I was on book 3, and I realized that I read it so long ago that I didn't remember what happened. I remembered most of the first book. I remembered nothing of the second book, and I remembered bits and pieces of the third book. So I had fun rereading City of Ashes, and they change the narrator constantly. I'm on the 4th book and like the 4th narrator. So I think that this one was probably my favorite narrator so far. I'm not totally digging the new chick because she talks too slow, but I definitely liked this one a lot. It was a lot of fun to, you know, re-enter this world and actually get engrossed in it again and remember what happened in it. So now we're up to the Booktube-athon. So the first thing that I read in the Booktube-athon was the other version of this, and I'll put a picture here so you guys can see it. It is just the gender swap. It's Bo and Edith versus Bella and Edward. It is more different than I expected it to be. I expected it to be a clone copy with gender swaps, but it really wasn't. It was its own book, and I ended up falling for Bo and Edith in the same way that I fell for Bella and Edward. After I read this again, I realized the reason that I stopped loving these books was because I hated the movies. And I'm sorry if you were one of those people who absolutely loved the movies. I did not. I did not like the movies at all. But I had a lot of fun with the gender swap. While I was working on the Life or Death Twilight version, I was also working on City of Glass. City of Glass is the last book that I had originally read of this series, and it was the audiobook that I listened to all the way to Jacksonville, all the way to Miami, and part of the way back to Tampa. And I listened to it and got my friends really interested in the series too. She really was rooting for them, and she was screaming and yelling and wanting things to end a certain way. And it was so funny watching her get all into it, because the parts of it that she was like climbing up the wall about were the parts of it that I actually remembered. So I knew, I was like, ooh, spoiler, I know what's gonna happen here. But I did honestly forget a lot more than I anticipated. So I think it was a really good idea for me to reread them. That way I can move on with the rest of the series, and I have already started. So the last book that I read, I was originally gonna read for the Booktube-athon, but I didn't make it. I was so overwhelmed that it got finished right after the Booktube-athon ended. So the Booktube-athon ended on the 30th, and I finished it on the 31st. And that was The Night of Cake and Puppets. It is the short story that accompanies the Daughter of Smoke and Bone series. It's book 2.5, and it's briefly talked about in the third book, but getting to actually read it, it's about two of the side characters, and it's about a little romance they have going. And if you have not read it, you totally should. I absolutely love that series. It's one of those ones that I borrowed from the library, and I so badly want to have my own copy of. So I'm crossing my fingers that I will be able to buy my own copy of that soon enough. So that is it. The last book that I really wanted to read for the Booktube-athon was Short Second Life of Bree Tanner, and I did finish that on the 1st of August. So I will have that in my next month. And just like the City of Bones Mortal Instruments series, I had forgotten almost that entire book. So it was good to be able to go back and reread some stuff. That's it. That is my wrap up for July, as well as my wrap up for the Booktube-athon. I will put up if I haven't already, I will put up the vlog for it. I'll probably put them up at the same time, put the vlog up, and then put this up too at the same time. That way you can go from one to the other. But it was a hot mess, and I apologize profusely for it, but something about waiting for airplanes and little kids made it so hard to read. So now that I'm home and quiet, I can actually have fun and read again. So I will talk to you guys later. Bye.